Hello and welcome to the AML Clinic podcast. In this episode, we sit down with a solicitor who's been through the rigors of an SRA AML inspection and lived to tell the tale. We will be discussing the pressures of running a high street law firm and what it really takes to stay afloat in today's legal landscape. If you've ever wondered what happens when the regulator comes knocking, this one's for you. My guest today is Christopher Christou. He's the joint founder, partner, money laundering compliance officer, money laundering reporting officer of Niles Christou in London. He specializes in commercial property and probate work, and he's also a trustee of a cancer charity. Thank you for joining me today.
Good morning. Thank you for asking me to join you.
You're welcome. I love how you describe yourself, Christopher. You say that your father was a Cypriot immigrant who worked hard to become an accountant, and your mother was German and you were born in London. So you describe yourself to your clients as having Greek passion, German efficiency, and a British backbone. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, no, they love it. they love it. Normally that's the deal clincher. I'm instructed.
I bet it is. Okay, so to start off with, do you mind sharing with the listeners how we actually met?
Yep. I will now say I had the pleasure of meeting you at
Thank you.
our AML inspection, which I cannot believe was last November. So really, nearly a year ago.
Wow.
So that the time has absolutely flown. So
Yeah,
yeah.
excellent. And how did you feel when you received the letter from the SRA informing you that your firm had been selected for an AML inspection? Were you
Uh,
excited?
it was sheer and utter panic, not being helped that it was, I think, in July, which coincided with the first day of my holiday, and running a small
Oh
law firm, I
no.
don't have many holidays. So thank you. Thank you for it's all about timing, as they say. So thanks for that. But
Oh dear.
no, it was, yeah, panic. I mean, the immediate thing is you worry. Running the firm. I think bigger firms, they have a compliance team, so it's sort of part and parcel of what they do.
Yes.
They know how to react. So it was, why have I been picked? Have we done something wrong? What
Yes.
are they going to find out? And that's the first sort of few days, and then you sort of calm down a bit, take a
Yeah.
few breaths, speak to other solicitors who have gone through it, and realizing, look, this is part of the process. It's
Yes.
happening to all firms, so it's going to be you one day. So get
Absolutely.
prepared.
Definitely. So, I mean, if we just look at the stats from when the SRA started doing inspections, I joined the proactive team in April 2020 to 2025, it's staggering. I mean, I don't have the percentage to hand. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, like you said. So, do you remember the documentation or evidence that you were asked to provide? So, what sort of things did the letter request?
um, well, I think originally I got it was a while back. So it was like client lists, in particular closed client lists from the last
Mm,
3 months, so that I suppose what you didn't want to get the letter and suddenly all the majority of files disappeared. Obviously, you're well versed and too
absolutely.
clever and cute to fall for that a ruse by some solicitors.
What I was going to add is that the SRA have published what happens on an inspection and what documentation they request on their website. So I will link that in the show notes. So if anybody wants to go have a look at that,
Yeah, I think
that's
that's
available for them.
useful for everyone. Yeah.
So Christopher, please tell me what happened on the day from your perspective. I actually remember the day very well, but if you could tell me from your perspective, from
Yeah.
the inspector arriving to the
I, I
end.
I woke up ridiculously early with a knot in my stomach. Got off a few stops earlier on the train and walked, sort of took a few deep breaths, but then actually, I mean, you had we had been provided with a list of files beforehand that you wanted to inspect, and I think obviously we had everything set out. I mean, I think you travelled, from Birmingham or that area on the day you travelled from out of London.
I
So
did.
I was pleased that I did check the weather to make sure that there wasn't going to be any delays on the trains because I didn't want to prolong the day. You came in, introduced yourself, and I mean, for me, I think immediately put me at ease, and I just sort of felt, what, this isn't a trick. This isn't someone trying to catch me out.
Yeah.
It was someone who basically wanted to help
Yeah.
and make sure we were compliant. And I think that's probably what I didn't understand until I had gone through the process. There was a big misconception as to what it was all about, and it was
Mm.
sort of like, I don't know, not them and us, which it shouldn't be, because
Yes.
that's not what the SRA is about or should be
Mm.
about, and it's not. But I think it does sort of, sometimes there is that bit of a disconnect between
Yes.
solicitors and the SRA, which is something that shouldn't be the case, because at the end of the day, you're just there for very, very good reason. And if if you run your firm properly, you shouldn't have any issues. But obviously no one's perfect,
Mm, of
and the
course.
pressures of running a small business or any business today in a tough economic climate, then it is difficult on that front.
Yes, no, I agree completely. And it's definitely not the first time I've heard that. So just from experience of doing inspections, and I have done hundreds of them, I honestly couldn't tell you how many. But usually people are really surprised by the end of it that, I haven't turned up to beat them up with a stick. And it's like you
Yeah,
said, it's just
absolutely. Yeah,
just to make sure that firms are being
yeah,
compliant. We all have the same goal at the end of the day,
yeah,
which is to stop launderers using law firms to launder, the proceeds of crime.
yeah,
But I
absolutely.
think the misconceptions come from the fact that most firms only sort of either hear from the SRA when there's some sort of investigation. So somebody has reported something about them. So
Yeah,
the SRA has to investigate, or what they see in the media, which is usually that a firm has received a large fine. But
yeah,
the reason why they received a large fine is probably not carried as much as the fact that they've received a fine, which is
yeah,
probably a separate conversation in itself.
yeah, absolutely.
So, roughly, how long would you say the whole process took from start to finish? So, from the point of receiving the letter to the point of receiving the letter from the SRA to say, it's all done.
All right. So um, I think that probably is my only slight criticism, because we got the letter in July,
Yeah,
and then it's sort of July, August, September, October. So it was hanging over us, as I would say, for 5 months. I think
sure,
we were offered a date a lot earlier, but that would have been within a few weeks of me coming back. Other
sure.
staff were on holiday, and I didn't think it was fair to put that on everyone, because
Mm,
you know. I think everyone's entitled to a holiday. For me to
of
ask
course.
staff not to take holiday to do everything, I mean,
Mm,
I think it was unfair, and I just took the hit that it was
yes.
going to be with us for 5 months. But
Mm,
I think perhaps that was a bit too long. But
sure.
that was just because of there's a limited team at the SRA, and
Definitely.
obviously carrying out more and more inspections, it's obvious things are going to be delayed. But so I think it was sort of 5 or 6 months
Yeah.
um, from start to finish. I think we got the sort of clearance letter, I think, towards the end of the year, a month,
Yeah.
as you said it would, a few, 2 or 3 weeks after the inspection, or a month, however long it was.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, that was it about that timing.
I think that's a fair criticism. So, I mean, as you touched on, there are limited people working there, and the SRA supervises something of like approximately 6,000 firms for AML purposes. So there are a lot of firms to the number of
Yeah,
people is, but I
yeah,
do appreciate when you are the
yeah,
person who's waiting,
yeah.
that's non-consequential to you, and
And of course, the SRA have now lost its shining star.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you saying that. That's very sweet. Thank you. So just in terms of preparation, and you were talking about the team a minute ago, how did you ensure your team was ready? Like, how did you keep everybody calm and prepared?
We had lots of meetings. I mean, we're a very small firm, so there's four of us. So we had lots of meetings and basically prepared. And we checked on everything we were doing just to make sure we were doing things correctly. We do outsource some compliance to a provider who, again, they're a small company, and because as a small firm, we can't afford a full-time compliance officer.
Hmm.
Um, they were invaluable, or they are invaluable. If I ever have a slightly niche question or not quite sure, just to bounce,
Hmm.
my ideas or thoughts or concerns with them. And I think that as a small firm really, really helps if you've got someone maybe away from your firm as well that you can
Hmm.
talk to, as opposed to just sort of scratching your head. Because sometimes if you're thinking about the answer too long, that's not a good sign.
Yes. Yes, agreed. So I suppose that leads nicely into the next question, which would be what advice would you give to a law firm who's probably just received a letter saying the SRA are coming?
Uh, I think don't panic. There is absolutely no need to, and you should trust in your compliance and procedures. If they're in place and everyone is doing what they're meant to be doing, then there should be no issue. Look, if you ask the solicitor, oh, do you have some files that aren't quite what they should be, or does everyone have that file they don't really like in their cabinet and they want to get rid of it? I'd be shocked if any solicitor said, "Oh no, absolutely." But you just got to make sure that you methodically, do your compliance and not sort of just catch up at the end to say you
Mm.
shouldn't regard it as, oh, this is something I've got to do. Let's tag it on at the end just so
Mhm.
that if I'm inspected, I pass. That's not the purpose, and that's what not inspection should be about. It should be from starting from the beginning and just making sure you do it, because you cannot do a transaction unless you start
Mhm.
the AML checks first,
Mhm.
because playing catch up, it makes a mockery, and there's absolutely no point doing it, because if you completed a transaction and then you're doing your due diligence and doing your risk assessments, or what's the point?
Exactly. Absolutely
You know,
agree.
the idea isn't, if you get an inspection, just to pass on that
Mm.
particular inspection. It's got, the procedures have to be in place, full stop.
Agreed. 100%. Thank you. So, okay, so let's move on to the challenges and the pressures of running a firm. So you wear many hats, obviously, as I read out at the start, and
Yeah.
actually that is quite common in a lot of firms, by the way. So I was going to ask, what sort of, I don't know if trick is the right word, but what's the trick to keep things running smoothly? How do you manage to juggle everything?
I mean, look, time is an issue, because much as I love my work, I I love my free time and my family time as well. So I think, I mean, the key is, you've actually got to be organised, and
Mm.
do not put things off. Don't sort of say, "Oh, I'll do this part of the compliance or this part of the procedure tomorrow." I think when you have that initial chat with your client, you know, ask all the questions. Don't be shy to ask the questions. Ask
Mm.
the hard questions if you have to. Because it's just, if you don't, it's just storing up a problem for you're kicking the can down the road, which isn't a
Mm.
good policy to do. Um, and I think whatever role you have or however experienced you are, don't, you know, don't be afraid to ask and admit, look, I do not know. And I think the day I think I cannot learn anything more working in a law firm is the day I should retire.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it applies to life in general, I think.
Yeah,
Personally,
absolutely.
I think at any given point you're either the teacher or the student. And I quite like being the student a lot of the times. If
Yeah,
you're the smartest person in a room, then you're in the wrong room, as the saying
yeah,
goes.
no, 100%, 100%.
So how has running a law firm generally changed over the last few years? I mean, if there are any reflections in relation to AML, that'd be great. But just generally speaking, over the last few, there has been a lot of changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly. I mean, like you mentioned tech. So
Yes.
AI is something that cannot be ignored, and
Yeah.
we actually now, I think as a small firm, we embraced AI technology straight away. And I think I had this chat with you. We were just starting out, and
Hmm.
it's a major expense for a small firm, which is absolutely, fantastic. I mean, obviously, the data is, so this is. Earmarked, the sort of the algorithm is a legal algorithm because I
Yeah.
think to put a question into Chat GPT
Yes.
chat is it, yeah, and then just get rely on an answer and charge your hourly rate. I don't
Bad
think that's
idea.
right. So I mean, it's a useful tool, subject to being checked. So I mean,
Yes.
I mean, you can put in a 50, 60 page lease
Mm.
and ask AI to summarize, or
Mm.
what are the repairing obligations. It will give you a starting point, and it saves you time. So AI is, I think it is the big thing. And I like to
Mm.
think one of the benefits of the small firm is that we've got in at ground level,
Mm.
and you know, well, obviously, I don't know. It's probably slightly different for bigger firms. I think it's probably maybe a bit harder to control. But because we're a small firm, we all know sort of what and of course, with that, you then sort of, if you're using AI, you've got to change your procedures and have an AI policy as well. So you've got to do
Yes.
one thing, and then you've got to think about something else as well.
Absolutely.
But it's I mean, it would sadden me if it's got its use, but if it went too far, and this isn't just for the law, it would sadden me, because
Mm.
then there'd be nothing worse than dumbing down the law to the extent that you just press the button and you got the answer, but the law isn't
Yeah.
like that. So
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree completely. So it's really interesting because the SRA did a thematic review on the use of AI and technology, and found that most firms, so again, I don't have the figures to hand, but I'll probably link it in the show notes. Most firms were scared of using AI, is what the story told. Some firms like yours embraced it, and some firms were petrified of it. But like you said, it should be used more as a starting point. So,
a junior staff member sort of, I think, I asked to do some research, and I was given the research, and I knew it was purely AI by
right,
reading it.
right.
And then I sort of said, look, I want you to think about it and put it in your own words,
Mm,
because this is no, it's not a way to learn.
no.
It helps, but it's not pressing a button and getting the final answer.
Mm.
You've got to think about it and put it into your own words to a certain extent
So it does have
as
some
well.
downsides. That's worth thinking about. The other thing that I was going to mention is in relation to obviously confidentiality. So, it, you know,
Yeah, that's the
if
policy.
you're going to
Yeah,
put anything
absolutely.
in, then you need to make sure that it's redacted. It doesn't have any personal
Yeah,
details, because
yeah,
that's another risk in itself. So
yeah,
swings and roundabouts. There are perks, but then there are also
yeah.
disadvantages.
Right.
But I
And I
think that.
think, yeah, so, and I think, I mean, I think the biggest challenge is clients' expectations. And I think not just with a small firm, and an email. I mean, now I see, sometimes if I send an email, I get an email back saying this will be treated like first class post, and it will
Right.
be dealt with, um, in a timely manner. I mean, I think I don't know the challenge, and I think it doesn't matter what you get an email, and I don't know for some reason, it's difficult. You've got to try and get away from having to deal with that email immediately, and I think that is, I think people just are bombarded with emails now, and I mean, you're copied in. Do you need to be copied in on every single email? Probably not.
Probably not.
But it's still in your inbox, and it means you do have to look at it. So
you can't ignore it.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. So I think that's
if we just move on to culture and ethics, how do you get your team, so I appreciate there are four of you, so my team, all four of you, to care about compliance without making it feel like a chore? So do you think the fact that you're a smaller firm gives you an edge in staying ethical and transparent?
um, I think it helped because number one, the culture. I think because we're a small firm, and we are like a family, and I mean one of I work with Christina, my sister, and she was at a big firm as a partner previously, had children, and didn't want to have to feel that she needed to work till midnight, be called in at weekends.
Sure.
So I think luckily we're all of a similar ilk, and we care, and we're conscientious, which is a great thing, but it can also be a burden because caring too much means being too conscientious. You take it away with you. So
Yes.
we do realize that you can't play with compliance, you can't play with AML, so that the consequences of not doing it are so great that we try and it's part of the transaction. You can't just do your transaction without doing the compliance. And I mean, years ago, I think it probably was regarded, oh God, goodness me, what a hassle, let's just get a copy of the passport and home address, and that was it.
Yes.
Risk assessments, I mean, 20 however many years ago, they weren't like they are now. They're definitely not. You ticked a box, and that was it. And nowadays, I think maybe going back, how it's changed. Getting to know your client, the transaction, and doing your risks. That is now fundamental to a transaction. And I think you can't do the transaction without that. And the fact we talk about it, any issues, our doors are always open.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to just create a culture where a door's always open. If there are any problems, let's discuss it, because I don't know. I suppose any advice, at a bigger firm for a solicitor just starting, if you ever make a mistake or there's ever an issue, own it immediately, because if you do not, it is only going to get worse. And
Absolutely.
if you admit to a mistake early on, it's dealt with.
Yes.
If you do not and try and kick it down the road, then that becomes a problem. And I think as a smaller firm, because there's no sort of hierarchy as such, and we're lucky in that the benefit of it, I can choose clients. If I don't like or want to deal with someone, I will not. And we're not reliant upon one particular big client who brings in so much work that basically I have to keep them happy. Well, if you're not, sometimes you can't be happy. And then if you're saying, well, I better not upset Mr.
Smith.
X, in case he takes his work elsewhere, and you get, I've no doubt, big chiefs of big organisations saying, if you don't like it, I'm going to go elsewhere, and
you can look the opposite direction because you don't want them to.
Absolutely,
yeah. No, I agree with that completely. Okay, so we're now going to come to our myth buster section. Is there one myth, AML myth, that you want to dispel?
Yeah, I think there's the fact that we know our clients well, so we don't need to do full checks. I think that is very, very dangerous, because to a certain extent, you only know what you're told, and familiarity sometimes is a dangerous thing. I'm not saying if you've lived next door to a neighbor, or you're acting for a family, your brother or sister, well, I think the ID side of things, should be
Yeah.
taken care of. But I mean, when I act for family, we obviously still do that. But there are, I don't know, it is dangerous, and you've got to, I can't. I think I met a solicitor a while back, and he, I don't know if it was his firm who had an inspection, or a friend of his, and they picked his brother's file, and he had absolutely nothing. And he said, "Oh, but he's my brother." And
Mm,
obviously, I don't know what exactly happened, but I think it was more than a slap wrist. So
sure.
you've got to, you've actually got to, document this, so that if a third party comes along, picks up the file, the
Yes.
rationale is clear. I mean, knowing your client is important,
Hmm.
and that really, really helps with the risk assessment, absolutely. But
Yes.
it's not the magic bullet to say, "Oh, I've known him for 20 years, he's a good sort, oh, he'd never get involved in anything dodgy." I mean, that's, you just
Exactly.
can't do that, full stop.
Exactly. So I heard someone say this, and I'm sorry, whoever said it, that I'm not crediting this to you, but somebody said once, Rose West and Fred West lived somewhere. They had addresses, they had probably passports or whatever form of documentation. They could have probably provided that to solicitors if necessary, but
Yeah.
that does not mean that you know them. And I know that's not in relation to AML, but it really brought the point
Mm.
home to me about the fact that you might see them, oh, they're only local, they live down the road, I see them every day, but they lived somewhere as well.
Yeah.
So money launderers have to live somewhere is the point.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh
That's
no,
the end of
my
this
pleasure.
episode of the AML Clinic. So thank you for your insight, your experience. If you are a solicitor or compliance officer or anyone in legal risk, I hope today's discussion has given you something practical to take back to your firm. And if you found this episode useful, consider subscribing and sharing it with your colleagues who live in the world of nuance, risk, and razor thin judgment calls. And if you've got a topic that you would like me to cover, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening to the AML Clinic. Until next time, stay informed and stay compliant.